My name is James Close. I'm the head of the Circular Economy Programme for London here at the London Waste and Recycling Board. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, this week is London Repair Week, and we've had a series of events and engagement to promote repair as a means of advancing the circular economy within London. London has an ambition to be a leading city and a leading low carbon circular city. So this is extremely relevant for the work that we're all doing collectively. And of course, electronics and electrical equipment are a great opportunity for repair. We produced a paper, and we're delighted that we've got one of the authors of the paper with us today on London's electrical sector, which was a review of current activity in London and good practice across Europe to accelerate the circular economy in the electricals sector. And this is we've got a really excellent combination of speakers here today to bring you a sense of what's going on already within London and challenge us all really to push the repair agenda forward in our city. So I'm going to run you through this agenda over the course of the next hour and a half, and then I'm going to hand over to George Brown from the London Borough of Bromley, who's going to do a demonstration on the circular economy procurement toolkit that he's developed in conjunction with us and piloted in Bromley, and we're looking to expand throughout the London area. So for the next 2 hours, we're delighted to have you with us, and we're looking forward to a really engaging conversation. And I'm going to start off by introducing Ugo Vallari, and Ugo was the co-author of the London Electricals Sector Report, and he has been extremely influential in this area as the co-founder of the Restart project, which is a vision to fix the broken relationship with electronics and promote repair, reuse and recycling as the new normal. He started Restart in 2013 in North London at a repair event there, and it's expanded both in the UK and internationally. So Ugo, I'd like to hand over to you, perhaps to give us your thoughts and to kick us off on this webinar. Ugo.
Thanks, James, and good morning, everyone. Well, it's really exciting. First of all, let me just say happy Repair Week, everyone, and happy International Repair, which is tomorrow. And we're delighted that the two are happening alongside, and as Restart, as co-organizers of International Repair Day, we're seeing it's popping up despite the challenges of 2020 in 23 countries around the world. We're getting close to 170 events. So there's really a lot of interest globally around this topic, and it's exciting to see the role that London play in this respect. We're seeing some repair weeks popping up in other parts of the world, and I think but none in a city the size of London. And so this can be probably of inspiration to other cities as well. So London can really use this as an opportunity to inspire others to go the same route and make repair more visible. And James mentioned a report that we did for LWARB last year on this topic, and looking at the roadmap for electricals and the circular economy roadmap that LWARB had created a few years back, and looking at what had happened in the previous 3-4 years and what are the prospects for the future. And one of the issues we identified, and James will probably agree with me, is that despite the increased awareness at public level that electricals and electronics pose a serious threat to the environment in terms of poor recyclability, and well, poor level of actual recycling, and the high impact of manufacturing of this product, there doesn't seem to be sufficient support, government support, and also a local level for putting them right at the center of a circular agenda. So what we recommended to LWARB was to continue the work that they're doing in supporting a network of SMEs working in this area, but also looking at ways to increase the public's awareness by making repair more visible. And it is exciting that this particular recommendation is already coming into fruition with Repair Week this year. And one of the things that we are aware of by having run hundreds of repair events across the whole of London in the last few years is that actually there's a lot more people that would like to repair than the people that are able to get that happening consistently. And as an organization, we've worked on this not just by bringing the toolkits for people to run their own events and supporting a network of community groups doing so, which obviously in 2020 is not easy to replicate, but also by shifting part of our attention to supporting the emergence of a local repair economy. And in that respect, we've produced a repair directory, which is growing. It currently features 125 repair businesses in London. And it's a tool available not just on our homepage at therestartproject.org. You can find a link there, but it's a tool that we are discussing with local authorities how can be embedded and further developed for their local context. Why do I mention this now? Not just because we are in the week where we are recommending local repair heroes. That's one of the hashtags for Repair Week. And so we are looking actively at increasing the body of knowledge around all the reliable repair heroes that can help push repair further, but also to continue looking at how even local authorities and other public and private bodies can actually embed repair practices. And I would like to mention two specific case studies from the report that we did last year, which I think are clearly relevant to this today's conversation. And also to the ongoing policy debates that are happening both at UK level and across Europe. Some of you might know that we are quite engaged on the push for better regulation to make the indeed new normal the default option. And so we are helping to push for right to repair regulation, both at UK level and at European level. And two of the aspects of this that we can push at both at a national level and with local procurement are indeed on product repairability. And so buying products that can be better repaired, and reducing the barriers to repair being more mainstream at all levels. So when we looked at good practice coming from across Europe, we looked at things that weren't happening in London yet, because, well, today we'll hear some of the very positive cases happening in the greater London. But we looked at two areas that I think are quite relevant. And one is in how can we have better recognition for repair providers. And so it's aside from the work that we are doing directly, we've been mapping what different models are used across Europe. And one model that we think it's quite interesting is what's happening in the city of Vienna in Austria, where a local repair network has been established, and primarily with funding from the local equivalent of LWARB that basically provides the vast majority of the funding to a body that creates a network of repair businesses, making them more directly visible to both consumers and local organizations, public and private. And the benefit of a model like that is that it makes repair, the infrastructure of repair more visible. And by creating an association of repairers, actually basically helps cross-pollination of the sector by providing opportunities for referral from one business to another as well, creating a united, seamless network that can help make repair more accessible for everyone. And I'm mentioning this also in the context of repair incentives because in the city of Vienna and that region of Austria, alongside the region of Graz, very recently have adopted a very interesting scheme where they provide grants to consumers, local residents interested in repairing electrical and electronic products. And by doing that, they reduce by up to 50% the cost of small repairs once a year for everyone, and promoted the local repair economy by sustaining a growth in use of the sector. And that is one lever that might not be practical right now for a city like London, but it's an interesting way to look at how can we nurture SMEs working in repair and create a culture that pushes repairability to the new normal indeed. And I would like, in parallel, to look at something that has been developed instead in Scotland in the last few years. And I think it's particularly relevant in the context of today's conversation. We've been looking at the work done in collaboration by the Scottish Government and Zero Waste Scotland on coming up with repairability criteria embedded in the procurement for all ICT products that the local government need to buy there. And what I found fascinating there, and the document is there's a whole paper that is called Procuring for Repair, Reuse and Remanufacturing. It's dated from 2016, but what I find interesting there is that the Scottish government was really seeing the push for repair coming, and came up with guidelines that are still extremely valid today. So guidelines such as minimum requirements when procuring, when tendering for new products, to the for minimum of 3 years of warranty, for example, minimum of 5 years of availability of spare parts for products once they are taken out of the market, reducing the amount of packaging in these products, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long list, and I don't want to go into too much detail now, but what's interesting to me there is that they created guidelines that are very similar to what the current movement for right to repair is trying to achieve at both European and national level. And I would encourage you. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the toolkit that will be presented today. But I would encourage everyone to read the 20 or so pages of the Scottish case, which are still of inspirational today, and they are interesting also because we're seeing in France, for example, from 2021, some of the same criteria, slightly adapted, are used for the first 5 categories of products, in electrical and electronics, including laptops and smartphones and washing machines and TV sets, to be part of a repairability score that will be mandatory for all online and physical stores, to show when people are buying new products, and to be placed alongside the energy label that we're all familiar with, so that at the time of purchasing products, we'll be required to actually, to display the information and inspire people to think about whether a product is repairable, whether spare parts might be available. And so this is happening in France, but there's no reason that the UK could follow suit. Obviously, it's not something that London could do alone in the context of the UK, obviously, but when we were preparing the report, when speaking to Zero Waste Scotland, they were making interesting parallels about how the size of London and the size of Scotland could be compared in the context of making sure that procurement guidelines can include strong uniting criteria. So as we all try to make repair more visible, I would encourage you all to consider how can we procure for products that can have their first cycle of life prolonged in the very organization that originally bought it, and that with the right incentives, so that if repairs are needed, system is in place to get this repaired as opposed to replaced, and to ensure that all can be done to improve the products during their first cycle of use. And I guess I'll stop here, James, and happy to take questions when the right time comes.
That's great, Hugo. Thank you very much indeed. And I see there's already some points being made on the chat, so please do keep those coming. And we have a panel discussion at the end where we'll pick up some of the questions here. But I think what you said, Hugo, is extremely relevant. Making local repair heroes and starting to make this a way of life, as we think about the prolonging of life of this equipment, which is of course entirely consistent with the definition of a circular economy, which is to keep materials and goods in circulation for as long as possible at the highest value possible. And many of these items that you've been talking about do have an enormous amount of intrinsic value, and of course a huge amount of embedded carbon as well. I mean, your average iPhone has over 80 kilograms of embedded carbon, the majority of which, over 80%, comes from manufacturing. And of course there's a whole series of rare earth metals and other very valuable commodities that have the potential to be in short supply, that need to be taken care of, and repairing is far better than recycling these materials, and the cost for doing it is a lot less. So Hugo, thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly in the panel, and I know there'll be some great questions around. And do please, for International Repair Day, look out your broken equipment and see whether you can get it and repair it, and use the directory that Hugo described that's on the Restart website. So I'm now going to move to a really exciting case study. of what's going on here in London and a partnership between HP Enterprise and the London Borough of Enfield. And when I first heard about this, I was really excited to hear about the whole concept of a managed take-back scheme and how it's been deployed in one of our boroughs here in London. So first of all, I'm going to invite Matteo, Doug and Ray McGann to say a few words. Matteo is the lead for HPE Sustainability and IT Efficiency. He's also a Green Biz 30 under 30, so a real rising star in all of this space. And Ray McGann is sales leader for HPE. And then I'm going to invite Martin Sanders, who's head of service for management and governance of digital services at Enfield, to say a few words, joined as well by his colleagues. So over to you, Matteo and Ray.
Thank you, James. So I'll just start sharing our presentation for today so that we can get some graphics on this. But good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting us, James. I'll start with probably the bigger picture around HPE sustainability kind of strategy and our vision in terms of circular economy. Then I'll pass it to Ray, who will get into operational and practices of our asset upcycling and certified pre-owned business. And then our colleagues at the Borough of Enfield will really touch on the specifics of this partnership. So here we go with my video. So really, first I wanted to take a step back and really looking at the benefits of this, because there is a misconception, especially in the IT world, that there is an additional cost for sustainability practices, when it's actually quite the opposite. And what we have observed is that close to 87% of executives have experienced revenue growth due to sustainability practices. And that's very much true in the public sector as well. What we also have seen over the recent months during the COVID crisis is that those financial products, financial indexes, etc., 85% of those that were respecting the ESG factors, so environmental, social, and governance factors, were actually outperforming those other financial indexes that were not, just because they were proven to be a lot more resilient to that. And finally, from a market value perspective, we've seen 70% of the companies that are really trying to push to partner with suppliers, with organizations that are really aligned to those practices. So it just makes total sense, and there's a clear opportunity for any kind of organization, being the private or the public sector, to really drive those kind of initiatives, not only to cut costs, but also to drive more revenue and reputation. From a challenge perspective, there is also a whole risk perspective to this. So not only there is an opportunity in driving sustainability practices and circular economy practices in organizations, but there is also a risk in not doing so. So from an IT perspective, what we have seen is that there is an obvious explosion of data. With that comes an obvious explosion of computational capacity demand. So that's something that we have to be very much aware of. The IT industry is still very much coupled to natural resources extraction, and those natural resources are obviously today finite. And the second piece is around more of the regulation side, where over the last 5 years, we've seen that there has been an increase of 72% regulations that are associated with environmental, social, or governance aspects. And that number could even be even bigger in regions like the UK or in Europe, where we all know that regulations is even stronger. And finally, something that is even more important, I guess, which is really around the shift in stakeholder expectations. So again, this is true for private and public sector, where not only we're seeing investors moving their money to responsible kind of stock markets, but we're also seeing customer shifting their expectations. We are seeing that at HPE, really, our customers are really demanding a more sustainable offering. And finally, the employees. I think IT world, everyone is kind of experiencing that lack of talents to hire and to having their teams, just because there is more demand than there is an offer. And so having an organization that aligns to those values and to the values of the millennials, which are going to be 75% of the workforce by 2025, is key to attract and retain those top talents. So that's also many risks that come with not implementing those kind of practices. And finally, I will finish on our vision of this, our circular economy strategy, which is really to have a life cycle approach to everything we do. We're not perfect. We're really trying to do the best we can at the moment, but we have a vision for it, which is this one. So in order to support customers, what we start with is design. So in 1992, we started with a design for environment program. So it's basically an eco design program. So in 2022, we'll have the 30-year anniversary of that program, which is basically built around how can we have energy efficient, easy to disassemble and to repair, and finally innovative in terms of the amount of material that is used, but also the type of materials that is used into all the portfolio that HP deploys. Second comes with the supply chain. So how can we really reduce the environmental footprint of the supply chain? So there is an entire initiative that is led by an entire team on that part. Third comes with the customer use. So in the data center space, most of the environmental footprint actually lies in the consumption phase, so in the use phase. We're also building the knowledge for customers to really help them optimize the use phase and the consumption of IT. And finally, the end of use phase, which is really what Ray will dive a little bit more in details into, which is really our capability to really take back those assets, refurbish them and redeploy them in the market for a second life. And so combined to that and really taking all of that into account is the as a service shift, which is really that transition to an economy of functionality, where we have committed to deliver the entire solutions as a service, which is really going to drive less over provisioning, but also extended manufacturer responsibility, so that we have to really take back those assets and make the best out of it. And with that, I'll pass it to Ray so that he can dive a little bit more into the details of the end of use piece.
So thank you, Matteo, and thanks, James, for your introduction a moment ago. I do note you didn't mention me in the under 30s. We'll get past that. So clearly, one of the key aspects that, again, James, you mentioned is around how do we reuse the assets that companies are currently using, and what's the economics behind it, and what's the benefits behind it. So what we have just quickly displayed here is how we, in practice, put the circular economy principles that Matteo spoke about from the sourcing and manufacturing into practice for our customers right across the spectrum, from commercial to public sector. So looking at them from left to right on my screen, or right to left, depending where you're looking, HPE asset upcycling services. So when we look at environments, one of the key aspects for customers is how do they then, at the end of their use period, have those assets managed carefully and sustainably through the end of use. What are the data security concerns? How can they be absolutely assured that all of the care and duty is dealt with? So our asset upcycling service is really designed around helping customers manage that transition from new assets being employed to old assets being deployed and moved out of their environment. What we have seen is a huge uptick in that service offering over the last numbers of years. In the last 2 years alone, we have managed just over 8 million assets in our technology renewal centers, and 90% of those assets have found a new home. So again, using all those assets, using all that material and putting it back to a second or third or even fourth user is a principle that underpins the circular economy activity. On the right-hand side of the screen, what we describe as HPE pre-owned equipment. So how do we do what I've just said? How do we take up to 90% of those 8 million assets? We have a re-engineering activity in our Erskine facility in Scotland, where we break every single asset we take into its smallest component, and we create new components and or whole new devices for end users who have a new application or who need those assets to continue their production. So we take the assets in, we re-engineer them, bring them to component levels, and then we get those assets and components and systems back out to customers to reuse. Sometimes even the same customer will reuse assets that we have re-engineered for them, or they go to a new home. In the middle, we look at HPE acceleration. Basically, what we're looking at here is how do we help customers move from an ownership program right now to a usage program? And that's where we help customers sell the assets to us, and then we will release those back to customers on a usage program over the useful life of those assets. Just about $1.3 billion worth of reuse we have created over the last 2-3 years with customers from modest values of mid $20,000 up to multiple millions. So again, it's to help customers move from a current scenario to a new scenario of where they used to have a take, make, and dispose program to a use program. If we move to the next slide, this is where we do it. And seeing is believing is an old-fashioned expression, but we have been really privileged to host so many customers in our facility up in Erskine, bring people through and over in America so that they can see firsthand for themselves. However, in current climate, obviously with pandemic in place, it isn't viable now for people to physically visit. But we've developed HoloLens technology review, a digital virtual tour, if you like. But because we're using HoloLens technology, you're actually able to see the facility in real time. And we do promote that people take this tour. This is to ensure that you can see firsthand what's going on. You can see it live. So through the eyes of that HoloLens technology. In fact, in many cases, customers say, well, my assets are due to go to Scotland at the end of the month. Maybe I could see them. And we're more than happy for customers to see real time their assets going through the facility like I described. So we will invite you to take a tour. And on our last slide, what I'd like to do now is just really say, look, there's many, many customer examples. This is one from the NHS. What was paramount for this particular organization was the fact that they needed a secure recycling program, reuse program, redeployment program. They needed to be sure that their partners really understood how the full life cycle works to ensure that they could continue their refresh programs in time, and they could take the funding that comes from the reused assets and reinvest that to new technology. However, I think it's probably much better if Martin Sanders and Julie Spillman from Enfield describe their experience.
Thank you, everyone. So, Martin Sanders, Head of Service at Enfield Council. Bear with me, I'm deaf and the captions aren't working today, so I'm being guided by my colleague Julie Spillman. So, background to where we were with the asset recovery service was we undertook a replacement of about 3,500 estate devices. As part of that, as you'll be aware, we had challenges in local government regarding our kind of budgets. So we had decided to have a look at what we could do with the equipment that we were replacing. Julie's details are on the slide because Julie was the person that led on this and came with us with the idea of looking at recycling and upcycling the devices. Sorry, I can't see the screen now. Okay, so one of the backgrounds to this was that in the past, the organisation had very much looked to pass on our old devices either onto charities or voluntary sector, but with the amount of data and the life cycle of those devices, we had to look at alternatives. So obviously we left in the organisation with a lot of kind of carbon challenges, and one of the ways to meet that was to look at using the kind of recycling process. So slide here is some of the things that we were able to provide to the rest of the organisation to say it's better to recycle rather than just push either into another part of the organisation, voluntary sector, or throwing them away. Go to the next slide. Okay. So the key driver for us was looking at bringing finance back into the organisation, and as you can see, we managed to kind of recycle over 2,000 devices. I brought in a sum of close to 6 figures to the organisation that filled a number of budget holes for us. It meant that we were able to then use that to kind of re-procure more of the assets and more assets into the service. It now means that we can look at an income stream. So one of the things we're able to do with our asset management, life cycle management, is to look to build this in as we replace any forms of devices. One of the drivers is that we bring some income back into the organisation. And it also means that we've been able to add that into the life cycle of the organisation. So instead of devices just being dumped at the end, we now look to use a recovery service as part of that. So clearly, with the kind of levels of data that we hold in an organisation, we have about 400 different services. We've got 350,000 residents, and we communicate with all parts of the public sector, the government, NHS. So it's quite clear that we needed a secure way of disposing or passing on the assets, and trust that it met all of our kind of very stringent security policies. So actually, in terms of what we did with XMAN HPE, it met all of those, a real high level and a really good audit trail. The kind of challenges we get from bodies like the NHS is we will be swooped upon and to demonstrate that we've actually securely disposed of our devices or recycled them, and all of that has met all of our kind of criteria. So we've got that level of reporting, we've got the certification that goes with that, and in terms of audit compliance, it's really high on our agenda, particularly the kind of threats that we see all the time. You saw just a couple of days ago, one of our neighbouring authorities was subject to a security attack. And now we have a fully compliant life cycle for our assets from start to finish. So that gives you a reason why we've kind of brought it in. Appreciate it. At the time, it seems a fairly straightforward thing to do, but there's a lot of things to consider in the organisation. And we do need to make sure that we can demonstrate that there's value from any activity that we undertake. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A. If not, please contact Julie on the email.
Great. Thank you, Ray, Matteo, and Martin. I just think this is a really great example of a public-private partnership. And as Matteo said, I'm sure everything's not perfect, but the leadership that HPE is showing here, along with Enfield, is really very impressive. And it's a great example, I think, of the opportunities that all London boroughs can have to both do the right thing and also save money. So thank you for giving us a sense of the work that you've done there between you, and hopefully we can create that in some form of case study that others can learn from. So I'm going to move on now to Daryl Arjun. So Daryl is the Managing Director of Reuse Tech. And Reuse Tech is redefining IT infrastructure by helping businesses and supporting an IT ecosystem. So over to you, Daryl.
Thank you very much, James. Managing Director up until the 1st of October, and that's now moved on to one of my colleagues, Russell Clark, who's now the MD, and I sit as the chair on the board for the business.
Okay.
appreciate the opportunity today to share what we do. Really similar to what HPE do, but on a more smaller, more intimate scale, I guess, with businesses within London. So I'll share my screen if that's okay. Let's see. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay. So if we go to slide. Okay. So our whole vision, it's around working towards a more sustainable world and growing the circular economy. And we do this through helping businesses to realize more from their assets. And when we started to look at our business model and the circular model that we've created, it had to be built around this whole idea of sustainability. And so our business model has these three key areas of sustainability, which is what is the environmental impact in what we do? And one of the barriers we have in this whole circular model, it's around the reverse logistics and what is our carbon footprint when we move assets around from end users back to our warehouse and push it out again. So there's that whole environmental impact we look at. But also as a business, we've got to be financially sustainable. We've got to be a business which can be profitable as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive. And so our business model has been based on created financial sustainability. And finally, there's this whole area around social sustainability within the circular model. And so we look to make sure there is diversity and inclusion within our business. We've worked really hard at helping, working together with other local SMEs in terms of our packaging, our logistics, our suppliers, and local employment as well. So we're really proud of the fact that most of our employees, if not all of us, including myself, we live locally and we work quite strongly to help local long-term unemployed to come in within the business. And one of the last things that we're doing at the moment is working with a charity called the Alliance of Sport and Leveling the Playing Field, where we are working together to help reduce offending and reoffending with young BAMEs across the country. But it's a project sponsored by the London Marathon Trust and supported by the Youth Justice Board. So we really look at environmental, financial, and social sustainability within our business model. Similar to what Enfield and HPE are doing, I guess, in our business model, we had to look at brand reputation through data protection and the whole idea around managing the assets in terms of data. And so compliance is one of the key areas for GDPR or data protection and disposal. We had to think about improving the bottom line, bringing value back to the assets that we've recovered, logistics and storage, and aligning with businesses and their clients higher values around sustainability again, and corporate and social responsibility. So what we've created, folks, is what we call an ecosystemic approach, where we think of your assets or our client's asset as an ecosystem, where we have businesses generating IT waste. And I use the word waste really loosely here, but generating end-of-life IT. Similar to Enfield, we have this whole chain of custody, transfer of custody process. We then have this secure consolidation, sanitization, the items or the kit hardware gets processed. And then we have this refurbished marketplace that it goes into. And I've said, before we talked about cradle to grave, but it's really cradle to rebirth and reuse, and then material recovery and remanufacturing. So we embed ourselves within your ecosystem, as it were, your IT ecosystem. And so I've called this sort of a circular model, a hardware as a service co-creation that we've co-created with our partners. And some of our clients, we get involved when they're thinking about their planning and designing of their new infrastructure or remodeling their new, we get involved at that stage, because if we can give some value to the equipment that they're taking out, it helps them to budget and plan and deploy better. And then there's the whole IT asset disposition part, where we take the assets out and do what we need to do with it based on the previous slide. And then we give a return on their investment in terms of that buyback value. And all the while, it's all underpinned with GDPR and we compliance. And so as part of this whole business model that we have around this circular business model, we think about that corporate and social responsibility credentials. So when we work with our partners, we think about the high number of reuse. So within our business, almost 98 to 99% of all the equipment that we take out is reused, is refurbished and reused, and we extend it for at least another 3 years within our business model. And whatever cannot be reused or which is not fit for purpose, we recover that material again for reuse in other sectors or manufacturing sectors, or reuse again in terms of material recovery within the same chain. We work towards a zero landfill model. So even things like plastics, cables, everything gets recycled if it's not fit for purpose in terms of reuse. And I talk about supporting SMEs where we partner locally and our community involvement. So we're able to support that corporate social responsibility agenda, but within a circular model. So that's my bit, James. Really short and sweet, similar to what the other bigger players are doing, but we do it at a more intimate local level within the City of London. I mean, we do work across the country, but we really think about our carbon footprint with the logistics, the reverse logistics, and we're not moving kit all over the country, but we keep it in a very optimized way. Now, this COVID pandemic has presented us with an interesting challenge, but also quite a great opportunity, because some of our clients, where they would have their users who are leaving, their new leavers and starters, would bring the equipment back into the office. What we've now been able to do is to hold some stock for their leavers and starters, and their secondhand kit or their kit which people have left behind when they leave, we would collect it, refurbish it, grade it, and then resend it back out to new starters within an optimized model. And so we've having to deal with this in a different way, but it's pushing businesses to think about how they're managing their assets, even within their ecosystem. Yeah. And so that's becoming quite interesting for us to have a conversation about.
Yeah, and I mean, so much, the pandemic's obviously been tragic, but there is a lot of innovation coming from it. And
absolutely.
We're delighted, Daryl, I think you were one of the early joiners of the Advanced London team, and we've been delighted to have you in our portfolio of businesses and to track your success. So thank you for joining us here. Next up, we've got another of our businesses in the Advanced London portfolio. We've got Emma Shaw from the Library of Things. Library of Things was set up in 2015 and a social enterprise on a mission to make borrowing better than buying. Again, delighted, Emma, to have you as part of this event, but also as part of the over 200 businesses in the Advanced London portfolio. And you're the co-founder and business director at Library of Things. So over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, good morning, everyone else. I will share some slides with you. 1 second. I hope you can all see this. Yes, great. So Library of Things is a social enterprise that saves people money and reduces waste by affordably renting out useful items like drills and sewing machines and sound systems, and connecting neighbours to share skills. This is us in a nutshell. We have developed a model for a community-led circular economy in South London, in Lambeth, over the last 5 years. And we are now in the process of rolling out this service across London, working in partnership with councils and community groups to bring it to new neighbourhoods. So next launching in Hackney Wick and in Morden in partnership with councils there, and looking for new partners for the next phase. An important thing to add is our other partners being suppliers, so leading manufacturers like Bosch, Karcher and Stihl, who produce high quality items which we then make available to communities in exchange for circular economy insights that we share back with them. So this is the problem we're tackling in a nutshell. It's a familiar problem. Consumerism, it isn't working for the planet, as you'll all be aware. Waste management costs are incredibly high, and electrical waste in particular is the largest type of waste in UK landfill. It's quite a hidden problem. In fact, it's growing at double the rate of plastic waste worldwide. For communities, we're seeing a real shift in high streets and a need for high streets to innovate, to stay relevant and build communities, in particular in the wake of COVID. And for individuals, it just doesn't make sense to buy and own things that you only use once or twice a year. Scary fact, 80% of household items are used less than once a month. That means that every time you use it, it's actually quite expensive. And then the burden of the repair and care for that item lies on the individual, whereas we believe that responsibility should lie with manufacturers. So we've developed this model that makes borrowing better than buying. It's affordable and it's convenient to communities. And this is how it works. Most people hear about us from a friend or from a neighbour, or perhaps they've walked past their local Library of Things. They can then browse our website. It's an online catalogue of normally about 50 products per site. And it ranges from Bosch drills to Karcher pressure washers, hedge trimmers, the North Face tents, Stihl, gardening products. And these are bookable by the day. So you'll see there £7 for a day for a drill. You can pay online. Then you're guided to your local kiosk where you collect and return the item to a locker. This is the kiosk installed in Crystal Palace Library on a high street. And it's an ideal space that provides 6 days a week access, normal times, and at the moment 3 days a week access. And sorry, just to add, we've also developed a home delivery model while spaces were closed due to COVID. Once you've borrowed, you're then invited to get involved in other repair and sharing activities in your local area. So we don't run these directly, but we connect to local groups who are running repair parties, such as those the Restart Project enable, DIY classes for people to learn how to use our products, clothes swaps, mending meetups. And this is a really important part of the kind of reinforcing behaviour change around borrowing and sharing. So the way we work is on a commission basis with an individual council, a £30,000 one-off commission that brings a Library of Things to a new area. We launch and operate that kiosk ongoing, delivering circular economy impact and benefits. There's a lot on this slide, so I won't read it all out. But the crux here is a localized service where thousands of residents are now accessing things rather than buying and throwing them away. That spares waste from getting to landfill, it reduces carbon emissions, and it reduces the waste collection bill on councils, as well as stimulating this behaviour change and kind of local employment impact. These are the types of people that use Library of Things. A lot of our users are from young families and young professionals, such as Abby and Leonie, you can see here, who just don't see the need to own things. They're increasingly environmentally motivated. They're looking to save money. They don't have much space at home. And then people like Jeff, who are part of community groups, who see this as a way of getting more involved locally through the participation program that I shared. And so in summary, this is what makes it possible for Library of Things to start in a new area, and we would really love to speak to you if this would work in your boroughs. It's a £30,000 one-off commission. By comparison, London Council looking to do this in-house budgeted £100,000 per year to run an equivalent service. So it's very good value for money, and it's all about outcomes over a long period of time. And we're looking for spaces to host these kiosks, as well as community partners, to really bring that local activation and participation in a new place. And these are my details. Would love to hear from you, and happy to take some questions.
Great, thank you, Emma. And I guess as I kind of listen to that and think about Library of Things, the sort of term no-brainer comes into my my head. I mean, you know, I think there's some data showing the average drill is used for less than 8 minutes in its whole lifetime. So we can aggregate and work together to do this. And we've already got some questions about how people can get them in their own boroughs. So hopefully we'll see this rolling out very rapidly. We're going to continue with our panelists. And thank you for the questions that are coming in. We've got some fabulous questions. We're going to curate those for the panel that will be kicking off very shortly. So our next participant is Svetlana Kanev. Svetlana is the Renew IT and IT Resale Manager at Crown Workspace. And Crown Workspace is another of our advanced London businesses, previously known as Premier Moves, and it really does have a visionary approach to relocation and a means of reducing the waste resulting from relocation. So over to you, Svetlana.
Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. It's probably, I would say that what Daryl said and Matteo and Ray probably will sound very similar, so I will try not to repeat all the same things again. Let me just share my screen. One second. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yep, I can see that.
So great. I'm sorry, 1 second. Oh, okay, that's better. It's a workspace business. Well, what James just touched on that. We started in 1996 as a commercial relocation business, and from that we've developed a whole service offering around the workspace. And you can see on the first slide on the left-hand side all the different services that we offer to our clients. Some of them are not exactly relevant to today's discussion, so I'll focus on the right-hand side for today, our sustainable solutions. It was the Renew Center and the Renew IT Center, which are the cornerstones of our sustainable solutions. This is where we add value to the community, to society, I would say. Initially, it was the Renew Center where we've been remanufacturing all the furniture, and that was started around 15 years ago. It has been very, very successful and very good model to follow. And around 4 or 5 years ago, this is where I joined the business. We started developing the Renew IT Center, where we offer sustainable solutions to our clients for end-of-life assets. And with the work we're doing, we try to again maximize on the economic, environmental, and social values. I would like to, the next slide I would like to share with you is our infographic of what our IT asset disposal service looks like. And this is probably a lot to take on that slide. But then again, it starts with we're auditing the equipment on a client side, building a proposal for our clients, organizing the logistics, and then from that follows to our IT asset recovery program, which is starting our Renew IT Center, which is in Edmonton. Probably similar to Daryl, we offer the service to lots of our London-based clients and around the area. And as you can see in the whole process, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and there's a lot of reusing, and this is what we're trying to do: reuse and promote reuse of equipment and repair equipment, of course. And there's a different stages, and they have to take a lot of decisions to need to be made. They have to prepare the equipment in such a way that it can be reused. There's a lot involved in that process. From, as you can see this from the slide, when the equipment is ready to be reused, there's a variety of options. Yes, we have something, a program called Giving Back Project, which is our sort of internal program. We have a lot of organizations and charities sign up to this, and we have done a lot of great work with them throughout the years. Another option for reuse is redeployment, where it might be a case of redeploying into an existing business. They might have equipment which is not fit for purpose for a particular department, but can be reused in a different department, and we will help and facilitate that for our clients. I think what's interesting, what Darryl was saying as well about with the current COVID situation, well, lots of clients actually, they not longer at their offices and they will be working from home. And we certainly work with lots of our clients to facilitate this transition and support the home users, whether through reverse logistics, whether we might have been to purchase certain equipment, refurbish equipment from us, and it's been great success. And it's been replicated not only in IT, but also in the furniture, and certainly chairs and desking. It's definitely been something that's happening on a quite good scale. Moving to the next slide. That's in a nutshell is the service, the secure IT collection and auditing on-site and off-site, secure data destruction. We're using our Blanco software, which is the world-renowned software for data wiping. Of course, there is also sometimes element of physical destruction of data-bearing devices, because we, particularly with the financial sector, we find that they've got security policy in place where they don't allow them to really reuse their hard drives, which is something that we support our clients with. And this doesn't mean this is the end of life for the equipment. It will be refitted with a new hard drive. This is which we will harvest from another machine, from another device. And again, we can reuse the equipment, and then it goes through the process of testing, reconfiguring, repairing of the equipment. Look at from the sustainability point of view, we definitely think on the top of the pyramid is the prevention, whether is through direct return and reuse of equipment, better internal management and stock control, being aware what you've got available, what you need. Not necessarily has to be the case of always need to purchase new equipment, because I can say that from my personal experience, lots of time it might be a case of equipment being purchased, it stays in cupboards, it stays in build rooms, in IT build rooms, and not being used for a long time. For better management and better stock controlling, it certainly will benefit the environment. And the next thing is through on the minimization, whether would be a direct reuse externally, where it's and then resell or donating to charities or to schools, is certainly a better way of extending the life of equipment, because I'm 100% on this, that it's not need always to purchase new equipment. It's not the case that it certainly is a case of after equipment is properly refurbished, security data wiped, re-imaged. When you're talking about IT equipment like PCs and laptops, certainly can extend the life. And then looking for the other options of recycling and recovery as a last options really on that. And that's just a glimpse of one of our workshops, what it looks like. And where we do all our work. We're looking to expand our operation internally and be able to provide even better service to our clients. We're piloting various projects at the moment, and certainly it's we're on the right track with this. In terms of where we can purchase refurbished equipment from us is through our online retail channels, office resale and IT resale, where you can order equipment on the fraction of cost of new, and that's been very well received by clients, and we have a lot of repeat orders. And this is, I just mentioned earlier, the Giving Back project. This is some of the organizations we've signed up with that project. It's been running for the last 10-15 years, and we have a lot of success with that, and certainly we'll be helping the communities. And finally, just give an idea that some of the organizations we've been working with, again, it's only a glimpse of all, but yeah, that's everything from me.
Great, thanks, Svetlazar. Again, another, I mean, I think it's really interesting that we've had this wide range of businesses from, massive global corporations like HPE to businesses that are on a very firm upward growth curve, and also social enterprises who are driven by a slightly different set of motivations, all seeing the enormous opportunity that comes from addressing the electrical sector through repairs and repairing their equipment. And one of the things that I think from the public side, and indeed from the private side, is how to incentivize that activity through procurement. I mean, a lot of procurement takes a very short-term view of how things get done and delivered, and that's one of the reasons why we end up with a replacement culture rather than a repairing culture. So George Brown, who is an environmental project officer at Bromley Council, has really done some amazing work here with our support here at LWARB, but through his own initiative and alongside his day job, really pushed the whole consideration of bringing circular economy into a procurement toolkit. And George, you're going to give us a brief overview now, and as to warm us up for a demonstration that you're going to give us after the panel that we've had. So just over to you, George, to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, James, and thank you very much, London Waste and Recycling Board, for having me today. So all you guys have just heard about from more or less the private sector about what's going on in the electrical sector, and so we're kind of going to hear about the other side, local authority officer, and how public procurement is a way to galvanize and really sort of embed circular procurement and the circular economy from the outset of contracts. So I'll just do a screen share like the others have done. So I'm just going to show the PowerPoint presentation, and that hopefully will get you guys the buy-in to stick around for the more in-depth demo of the toolkit. If you don't have the time this afternoon, that's fine. I've got a video which sort of with my terrible voice over the top of it that has demos the toolkit as well. So if you've not got time, I'll be happy to circulate a link for that. Okay, so we'll just start off about Bromley's circular economy journey. I sit inside the carbon management team. We used to be called the sustainability team. Our focus, because we are recently with 3 full-time employees, but when I was working with LWARB on this project, we were 1.3. So we were really trying to sort of push an agenda into procuring more sustainability with quite a limited amount of time and resource at our disposal. So we started off working with LWARB on this toolkit, and it was quite a natural journey. The way it started was that the carbon management team measure our emissions, and we look at how we would want to reduce them naturally. And scope 3 emissions, our procured emissions, are substantially larger than our direct and organizational emissions. So as sustainability professionals, we thought this is a really good area to sort of address, and it needs addressing, and it often goes unrecorded and unnoticed as well. So a few of our key policy documents is the carbon management program, and that is the sort of report that we use to report against our emissions annually. We've last year introduced our net zero 2029 organizational target. So pretty much what we are trying to do now is feed into going net zero by 2029. Having said that, that is only our organizational emissions target, and the much wider job to be done is addressing our supply chain emissions. Hence, when we decide to investigate when we want to go out to tender, looking at our contracts, we wanted to make sure that we will not only have our house in order, but we want to see it affecting our suppliers and making sure that we were bringing them along with the circular economy journey as well. So the way this started was meant to be generic guidance for people like myself who were going to go through a tender process, and it quickly developed into guidance was a bit too top heavy. Nobody really had the time to read through the documents. So it kind of felt, how would we go about solving this problem where local authority officers don't have the time, maybe not the industry knowledge, or in particular the sustainability knowledge, and because circular economy is still quite new, maybe the circular themes. So we thought, okay, why don't we get the target audience, the user, to just put in things about their contract that they think there might be an opportunity to explore or tease out sustainability and circular themes. And basically the toolkit is designed to be really user-friendly, really fast. Again, I think we've been trialing it now, and it takes about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So it really isn't too much time out of an officer's day. It's meant to sort of, it is designed for people who don't have any knowledge of sustainability and circularity. And the idea is that this basically will allow the toolkit to reach a lot more audiences, and it doesn't put people off into the whole sustainability jargon as well. And the objective is basically to get users, whether they know anything about sustainability or not, to start considering these themes right at the outset, and to start thinking about the circular business opportunities that they could think at the outset of the before going out to tender procurement. And it's really important in this regard, because all too often these ideas are thought at the end of the contract development and the document creation, and they're sort of just seen as an add-on. Whereas the correct approach is to think about them from the outset, so it's embedded holistically all the way through. So that's what this toolkit is trying to do. It's trying to sort of get users to think about this stuff at the outset, and hopefully provide some suggestions, some outputs that they can put into their contracts to tease out circularity and sustainability themes in general. The categories under appraisal are the three sort of pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, economic, and economics. So just going on from the toolkit outputs, there are tangible outputs. So the toolkit is an Excel spreadsheet. You put the data in there, and then you just click a button and it kicks out this Word report. And obviously this Word report will be populated with all your input data. The each category, it ranges from emissions management to air quality to things to more socio-economic things like the number of jobs that were created locally. So it's trying to holistically combine not just environmental management and waste management ideas, but also the added social value benefit to that. So as you can see, it comes up with certain categories, and we'll go into more in the toolkit demo. Suggested specification wording, how we would write the award criteria questions, and there's metrics as well to sort of capture what those questions are asking. And then it also provides some commentary on 5 circular economy business models. And so the idea is that this Word report is kicked out, and users are pretty much able to cut and paste the Word document and put it into their contract documents. And so that leads on to the trial in the toolkit. And it is actually currently being trialed on a real tender exercise. So I was quite fortunate enough to be able to work with LWARB to develop the toolkit, and then we found an opportunity to install some solar PVs onto one of the Civic Centre building blocks. So this was a real good opportunity to not only create something that we thought could add value, but then now we're actually going to get a real life case study together. And we went out to tender last week, so we are right in the midst of it. And I'm really looking forward and excited to sharing the results with you guys. But so what we did and took out from the output of the toolkit was, it was literally a cut and paste job from some of the specification wordings, the award criteria questions in there. So suppliers will have to answer and submit method statements to them. We've got the monitoring metrics aside for us, so we can look and measure and look at those responses and appraise them against the question. And also there's a circular economy business opportunities that are teased out. and they're more embedded within the toolkit, as we'll show later on in the demonstration. So again, once this is completed and we've got the results going, I'll be really excited to sort of share those results with you guys, and then roll it out internally first and foremost, and test it on more different types of Bromley contracts. But this is with an eventual strategic view to roll it out pan-London for all local authority officers, sustainability professionals, circular economy aficionados, or otherwise. And purely just as sort of, in my personal view, the more this is rolled out, the more people are using it, the more the toolkit can be tested, and therefore the more we can start refining the toolkit into more specific sectors such as repair in the electrical industry. So one of the ideas about the toolkit is it's currently broad enough to capture all different types of contract. And so again, if you're not a sustainability professional and you're sitting maybe the traffic department or the highways department, you could use this toolkit for that, because the advice given is generic enough to be broad enough to capture all different categories and contract types, but pertinent enough to actually give some proper outputs. So yeah, thankfully, obviously I'll be sticking around to answer some questions and to do further demo toolkit and a little bit more in depth in how the toolkit actually functions. As I said, if you don't have the time this morning, I'll be happy to circulate a link through LWARB so you can have a little look at the toolkit in your own time. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. Well worth having a look at that, and it's something we're going to be really promoting very heavily because we think it's just such a great way of linking the public sector and public procurement to small, medium-sized enterprises as well as big enterprises, and incentivize them to come up with innovative propositions that actually improve the way in which the local authorities can deliver to their citizens. So it's a very important piece of work. So that completes the presentations for today. I think you'll agree it's been a very wide-ranging set of observations, some really practical insights into what's going on around London, and hopefully we can all pick up these and maybe, you know, as we think about what we do collectively, go away and with a call to action around increasing repair of electricals and doing whatever we can in our communities and in our businesses and in our local authorities to enable that to happen. So I'm going to invite all the panelists to put their cameras on again. Thank you for all your Q&A that's come through. I'm going to pick out, we're going to do about 15 minutes of Q&A. And I'm probably not going to do justice to the questions that have come through, but others will see them on the Q&A on the platform. And please do keep adding your questions and observations as well. So I think the first question is probably a question of clarification here for you, Ray and Matteo, because I think it's Parisa has asked the question about printers and why printers aren't easy to repair. But I think from your point of view, Matteo, that's not your business, is it? You're much more in the hardware and the large-scale IT systems.
Well, yeah. Well, it's something like that, James, exactly, which is that HP, long story short, HP, the old HP splitted into 3 major companies in 2015. The HP Inc. is the one you probably are referring to, the one that still does printers and laptops. That's not us, even though those are great partners still today. We are HPE, which is really the B2B sector, anything in the data center, etc. Though I will say that what Ray mentioned as a capability is a capability to take back all kinds of assets and to take back things like printers, laptops, smartphones, of all brands and of all types. So both from the workplace to the data center space, we are able to take all those kind of brands back into our refurbishing and technology renewal centers and refurbish them and give them a new life. What we cannot do is definitely have an impact on the design, which is probably the question here. We don't have any, let's say, any impact on the way HP Inc. or anyone else really designs their own products. But HP Inc. does have a strong design for environment program as well that I'm not super familiar with, but I know it's a heritage from both of our companies.
Great, thank you, Matteo. Daryl, I'm going to come to a question for you now around the buyback value, and that you can incentivize businesses and councils to get involved and covering the standard fee of reuse and technology group for your work or a percentage of their costs. Mm-hmm. Is that possible? And if not, how would you go about something like that? Over to you.
Yeah, so James, more often than not, we could offset that cost through the value of the equipment that we're taking out, more often than not, because what we're able to do is to get revenue from the actual equipment that's been taken out, and also from the material recovery value, more often than not. But for smaller businesses, quite often there isn't enough value in there. Unfortunately, there is a cost to collection, logistics, just getting in and out of London, and the cost of the license to data wipe securely. But for larger organizations, most of the time we can offset that cost through the buyback value. Having said all of that, we hear quite large organizations still asking us, oh, can we get this done for free? And somehow we need organizations to start to understand the value in what we're doing. Just the compliance requirements alone is really important from disposal or data protection. And organizations need to start to think a little bit broader around what they're doing. The reporting value of giving them back some figures around how much has been reused, recycled, there's a value in that alone, just in the reporting features in the work that we do. And I guess that's probably the same for HP and for SVET as well. So I think I'd like to start the conversation not just around how much it costs and can we offset it, but what's the bigger value that companies like us are adding to this whole process. But for sure, most of the time we can offset that cost. I just want to go back, is it okay, James, on the printer point. So, and I think Parisa is right, the sort of buyback value, because printers are so cheap now. But when we collect printers, we consolidate them into a larger consignment, and then we send them to a different organization who can refurbish and sell them, because it's not really cost effective to ship one by one or sell them as individual units. But when we collect it, we can consolidate it and send it to one specialist then who can then resell it, refurbish it and resell it. So there are ways in terms of how we optimize our logistics and optimize our operation to reduce the cost and make it more commercially sustainable.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think that's very clear. So Carol, you've made a couple of points to Emma, a request for a library of things in Broccoli, and also I think an observation that that you're trying to do this on a street level in terms of lending things to each other. And perhaps, Emma, you could just pick up on the benefits of doing this in a slightly more systematic way locally. So over to you, Emma.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank God for those questions. So I think 2 points. The first about we'd love to see neighbours sharing among each other. Absolutely, and I think that's where we started Library of Things, assuming that was something that could just happen. And I think there's a number of barriers that exist that are stopping peer-to-peer sharing of items happening at the moment. And I think one of them is just the cultural side. We don't have a culture of sharing items necessarily, particularly in London, where it's fairly transient. And I've lived in all 4 parts, like north, south, east, west parts of London, and found it really hard to get to know neighbours. So without that infrastructure there, I think it's hard. I think there's convenience and trust barriers to actually borrowing things from somebody else who's responsible for that, and the hassle of being in when the other person needs to get it and when you need to return it. So Library of Things was really a response to how do we create that in a place, and we would love to see that we can't lend out everything, and we have no intention to, but it's really to see it as a bit of a multiplier effect where some high quality products, expensive products like carpet cleaners, very few people need to own a carpet cleaner when you probably use it once a year. So really we see it, Library of Things, as creating that broader behavior change and connections between people in a place. And then I wanted to signpost you and others to how to put yourself on the map, because we we only go where there's demand, and we work on an invitation only basis. So we'd like to be invited in by a particular neighborhood to be starting a library of things with you. And there's a page on our website, which is libraryoftthings.co.uk/new sites. You'll see a map on there. You can add yourself to that map and to that form, and that puts you into our database, really, and we can start the conversation from there. So that's for Carol and for others to do.
Great,
so.
Thank you, Emma. I think you might get a few flags coming into that map. It sounds like a great idea and a great way of building community as well. So that's very interesting. So back to you, Ren, Matteo. A question here from Rosario. What initiatives have you got in place to redesign and re-engineer product at source to redeploy later?
Ray, do you want to take this one?
Well, ultimately, you know, I think the focus from HPE going back, you know, we're 80 years on the manufacturing industry, and I think, you know, as early as the late 80s, all of the design features of HPE equipment is designed for reuse. So, you know, I think it's retrospectively you can do very little if the product you have made doesn't have recyclability and reuse built into the asset. You know, when you get it back, like Daryl spoke of and you know, we've spoken of, if at that stage you get it back and it hasn't that inbuilt, you've very little you can do about it. So, you know, one of the things that HPE do and continue to do, and that includes both the HP Ink, which would be the printers and the PCs, and also server technology, they're designed from the very outset to be reused in the future, either at a component level, material level, or full system levels into the future. So, you know, that's actually hardwired into the design features.
Great, thank you. And then the final question really for you, Ugo, although I think others probably have covered you on this. You know, we're really redesigning a system here, and there's a whole series of incentives that need to change, plus all these new business models that come about. But it strikes me, and also thanks to John Pavitt for this question, that 3D printing is a really important part of the solution here, because, you know, I know a lot of the things that I've lost one small part, and you can't go and get an individual part. But if you could 3D print them, that would make life much easier. So Ugo, do you have a view on that at all?
Yeah, interestingly, we're part of a European project where some of our partners are looking at how 3D printing can be embedded in some of the community repair activities that are happening across Europe. And what our view on this is that there is some promise for 3D printing. It might not always be the kind of 3D printing that you and I have in mind, where, you know, you think of a knob and you can just get it printed in the closest workshop that has a 3D printer. It might be 3D printing can play a role in creating better opportunities for long-term availability of spare parts that don't need to necessarily be stored in big warehouses, but can be produced in, almost on demand. All of these things are possible. I think, however, that the answer to that is that we do need better product designs that allow for repairability, whether with 3D parts or other sources of parts. And what we are seeing is, you know, the question about printers was a good one earlier, because that's the typical product that frustrates so many people. And so on the one hand, it's about choosing products that already now are lasting longer. So for example, for the case of printers, it's laser printers that tend to be better suited for home office and big and small offices, and or printers that make it very easy to refill the cartridges. So it already happens, but equally we need to make these initial steps available to everyone, and so require that manufacturers adhere to standards in manufacturing that make replacing a spare part is possible, and just accessing them for long term, whether you are the first user of that product or whether you are someone like Daryl's company that doing refurbishing of a product and needs upgrading it and extending its lifespan. But so 3D printing might in the future play a bigger role as we evolve from printing plastic parts to printing more of materials that could increase IT products or electronic durability as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Ugo. I think Svetlana, just a question to you. You know, you're in this system, you know, that we've been talking about. You're at one of those major inflection points when people move. How do we leverage that point to get maximum impact? What's the way in which we can kind of use these, you know, key touch points to change the way in which we do some of these things? Over to you, Svetlana. That's up.
Well, I cannot probably answer perfectly from the whole company point of view, because I'm really focused on the renew IT in the IT asset disposal.
Right.
Certainly, we see a lot of changes around the whole industry, and now with obviously with the pandemic, it's a very strange environment. What's been happening, and I think the whole workplaces looks like they will change, and at some point there was strong will and desire for agile working. Now that's not really happening anymore because of the pandemic, and then whether this will come back to this again, or I think it's very, very difficult to say how everything will change and what is a new normal, and whether still going to be offices and locations, and how the office life will work in the future. I think it's very hard to predict at this point of time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, and you know, good luck to Crown Workspace, Library of Things, Reuse Tech, HP, and the Restart project. Congratulations on the work you're doing. You know, I think this is going to be an enormous growth market. We see amazing solutions coming up, and those can be driven, I think, by public sector procurement. And well done, Martin and Julie, on the work that you've done at Enfield, and also to you, George, for promoting this through the Circular Economy Procurement Toolkit. So I'm going to leave it there for the panel discussion, and I hope you really enjoyed hearing about some of these practical examples, what's going on the ground, and feel inspired to make tomorrow a genuine International Repair Day. But not just tomorrow. Let's make this the International Year of Repairing, and we can really start to take all those things that have become obsolete or sit around doing nothing, get them out there, get them repaired. It'll create great jobs for people, build up skills in these areas, and as you've heard, can really create a different sense of community and reduce the whole life cycle cost of what we're doing, as well as being really productive and useful for the planet as we face the climate emergency that's right in front of us. I mean, this is a key enabler of reducing consumption-based emissions, which is going to be central for us stabilizing the Earth's temperature. So I just would like to thank Ali and Isabella, who've worked brilliantly on pulling this together. I hope you all agree that it's been tremendously insightful. Its logistics are always extremely complicated, but they've done it with their usual patience and panache. So thank you both to Ali and Isabella. And thank you to all of you who've participated and asked some really great questions. And I hope you can stay on and enjoy the demonstration from George on the toolkit, which genuinely has a chance to make an amazing difference to the way in which we go about things. So thank you all, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy International Repair Day tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Over to you, George.
Okay, thanks very much, James. I'll just do a screen share again. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yep, I can see that.
Great. Okay, great. So it is on magnified to 140. I assure you when it will be on your own desktop that it's perfectly fine to navigate on 100 or 90%. But when you're doing the screen share, I think some of the text doesn't come quite through. So bear with me. Yeah, so this is the toolkit, and you've got, as I said in the previous presentation, the idea is meant to be quite light touch and easily accessible for users who don't know anything about sustainability but might not necessarily know anything about procurement. So it's not necessarily directed for procurement professionals either. It's for people who will be expected to write the contract documents and take a lead on the tender when it comes to their service. So without further ado, this is the sort of introduction page. Let's say, is that the aims, the context. This is the LBB context, but it's written generically that supports most people's policies around their own carbon emissions and their climate emergencies. Like I said in the presentation, when it comes to when it's used, it is best used from the beginning, purely because from a principal sustainability point of view, it's best to start thinking about these issues from the outset. Massive yellow boxes with red writing everywhere. That's basically just to tell you as a user to do something. I will say the sort of caveat down here with the important bit is that this toolkit does kick out, as I said before, generic guidance. But it's guidance that covers, is intended to cover all these different types of contracts. It's your responsibility as the user, as the person that's going out to tender, to go over this guidance. Don't take it as gospel. You need to make sure that what the contract outputs that the toolkit suggests is actually enforceable from your point of view, from a resources point of view, so you really do need to go over the what it suggests, purely because you need to double check and make sure that your house is in order and what you're writing in the contract, what you're putting in there, can actually be done. So the profile tab, so I've just filled out the North Block example, the solar PV installation that we're currently trialing. I've taken out some of the sensitive information, but yeah, so this profile is just the profile tab, just fill in your details there. So the procurement options, and I appreciate this is a bit of a big tab here, so I might have to do some sort of scrolling around, but apologies if the text there is too small. But basically the idea of the procurement tab here is to make the user first and foremost think, is procurement really necessary? You know, sort of following the waste hierarchy is the procurement hierarchy. So this toolkit asks you as the user, as the person that's going to go out to tender, to first initially consider, do you actually really need to go out to tender? Is there a need to go out to tender? Is procurement really necessary? Does this intention to go out to tender reflect the need of the service of the business that you're currently running? Or for our point of view, does the local authority really need to do this? Again, next step of the procurement hierarchy, reuse. So can existing assets be first reused internally? And so just in the context of today's seminar on electricals, an asset register has quite evidently been really important in developing and being a real cornerstone for teasing out circular economy opportunities. Everybody here that's talking about claiming back things and repurposing and making use of materials that would otherwise go to landfill would hugely benefit from an asset register. It's not what this toolkit does, but in terms of a strategic point of view, when going out to tender, you might want to start to reconsider or put into the contract that you want an asset register being developed, so you have that waste management process informed at the end. And so wherever there's these icons for circular economy, this means that there's opportunities for circularity, basically. So collaboration would obviously mean a shared service. So can you enter into a sharing arrangement? And again, that's just to sort of signpost the user to, again, they might not know that collaboration is a circular business model, And so therefore, and you usually find a lot of people in a lot of industries are already doing these sort of ideas. They just don't know it's circular. So this tab can take you to a sort of generic guidance tab here. And again, that's just kind of sort of illuminate very quickly to contextualize the London context, as well as traditional linear economy versus a circular economy. So going back to the procurement options tab. So obviously with the, as it gets said, big red letters here, yellow boxes, this is where you put in. So the whole spreadsheet's locked. The only things you can put in is here. And so going through the procurement process, we did need the solar PV. We want to cut our emissions. We want to be more sustainable. So there wasn't a need to rethink it. That we couldn't reuse anything internally because we didn't have any solar panels. Can't really share solar panels in the building. So these three initially, we've gone through the procurement hierarchy, we've looked at it, and we thought, oh, okay, yeah, it does look like we do have to go out to tender. And the fourth one is service in lieu of products, you know, whether or not you can purchase the desired outcome rather than the equipment itself. And so this kind of gives you the opportunity to do a bit of market research at this tab stage. And we did do some market research. There is emerging literature on the idea of circular photovoltaics specifically. Arup did a good study based in Australia. Personally, we thought that because the toolkit is being trialed, we didn't really want to push too much with the circularity as of yet, but we did find a framework that accommodates this anyway. So looking at the below instructions, before proceeding, again, it's asking you, can any of these be appraised, explored, gone forward first before you actually start going down the tender route and spending money? So that this initial tab is to basically nip any sort of waste of money, the use of unnecessary amount of resources right at the beginning strategically before you actually start appraising categories. Now, as I said in the presentation, we have several categories. We have environmental, so nicely green there, and socio-economic, which is the amber. And inside these categories, we've got outputs for improvement. So you've got environmental, industry and specialty standards, biodiversity, energy consumption, and again, you've got these circular tabs here to demonstrate that there might be circular opportunities within this. So this toolkit, even though it's called the Circularity Toolkit, there's no specific things really that's asking you to talk about circularity. And when we came to devising this, we did have a discussion about, okay, maybe do we want it really obvious so we can so we get users to think about them on their own accord, or do we just embed it so they don't really have to think about it, and then the toolkit will tease those circularity models out for us? And we don't know yet, obviously, because it's still under trial, but we think the latter approach is better because it's just less confusing. People don't necessarily have to learn the whole circular economy principles from scratch. And where I see the value of this toolkit is basically we have a relevance column here, and it's high, medium, low, or not applicable. So what you do is, as the user, you would to yourself think, how applicable is this output for improvement relevant to my contract? How much do I want it embedded? If you don't want it embedded, but you want to have it, you know, just sort of paying some sort of lip service to it, maybe you want low. If it's totally not applicable, you just click NA. And then with the high level, it's quite strenuous, really asking for a lot of evidence. The specification is quite onerous on the supplier, but you will achieve a lot more sustainability outcomes because it is onerous. So this toolkit's meant to be quite dynamic in the fact that you don't have to include all of these outputs for improvement. You can only choose one. You have to choose ones that are applicable to your contract, and in turn, some can be more applicable than others. So you've got that option of you know, tailoring the specification, tailoring the questions to something that is able for you to enforce, but also not too onerous for the contractors themselves. And again, there's some level of intuition here because you are the user, so we're not going to hold your hand as much as we try to sort of hold your hand in terms of descriptions and examples. You do have to kind of sort of think for yourself a little bit, as much as the toolkit tries to do all the thinking for you, and to go, is that unreasonable? Is that able to be enforced? If it isn't, just knock it down a level, you know, from high to medium or something. So you can go back and obviously make changes. And this is the summary page. This actually isn't really that much, you don't really need to pay attention too much to this page because this is just a dashboard view that takes into account all the previous tabs. And the when we first came to devising it, it was great that we had this sort of summary view, but I personally thought it's not very user-friendly because cutting and pasting from Excel all of this tabular stuff is just going to be a bit of a nightmare. So the idea was that we would run a macro, and it will click out a Word report that users could put in. So this Word report that we did went into a committee report, so that informed the procurement process, and we were able to sort of use that Word document as an evidence that we looked at these sustainability categories. So for the local authority officers that are listening in, not too sure what your procurement process would be, but this can also form a little bit of sort of in-house housekeeping, actually, in terms of maybe just at the worst a tick box exercise to say you've appraised some sustainability and circular things, but at the very best you're pretty much using this to embed circularity and sustainability. So it really is what you make of it. You can use it as much as you want, and you can use it as little as you want as that tick box exercise. So you click here for the Word report. So the macro, it's quite a bit of a tool. So the macro does run. Hopefully runs. Thank goodness for that. So I'll just put this one on. So it kicks out the Word document, and all we have to do is cut and paste things. And so what we've got here is we've got supplier help, so we can provide suppliers some help. We've got an ideal response, so we know what we can include. And then, so that's basically, all of this is just the categories that we've just entered in before. You have the considerations for inclusion specification. So this is the wording that the toolkit's putting out. We've got the recorded relevance here. So you're expected to say why it's relevant. And again, that's not just for audit purposes, it's for your own sort of reasoning when you can go back and revisit it. And this has basically formed the cornerstone of the specification. Now, we used a framework for this. It's a really good framework, but it was missing a chapter on sustainability and social value. And basically what we did with the toolkit is we cut and paste all the outputs from here into this sustainability chapter. We didn't use all of them because, again, that's that intuition about, oh, that might be a bit too onerous, or maybe we want to see suppliers actually come to us with ideas. So we're really happy to see that there's now a sustainability chapter in there. I've obviously highlighted it for your ease of to see. And what we're now in the stage of doing is testing all these contract documents. And as I said, we went out to procurement tender last week. And the results of that is going to be really interesting to see the added benefit of what this procurement tool can do. And like I said, the end goal is to, once we've got these test results in and we've refined the tool, we've come back with a bit more suggestions maybe, and then we will look to sort of use this tool as a networking opportunity. So maybe try and connect SMEs, and in particular the ones that would work in Bromley's local authority borough, and try to use the toolkit to connect businesses locally. And again, that adds a social value element to it as well, but it's the idea to procure locally to build up the local economy. And there's no reason why other local authorities couldn't adopt this and use it in the similar respect. So really exciting. It's not finished yet, as I've just said, and quick fire in terms of there are quite a lot of categories, I must admit, there really are. But at the end of the day, it takes about 40 minutes, 30 minutes to do. So despite it being a lot, they're not all going to be applicable to your contract. And I really would like this to be rolled out, and I would open up some dialogue with other local authorities in particular and get their steer on it and how they would like to tailor it and make it work for them, but also come back to Bromley with some suggestions about how we could improve it for ourselves. And the next step would then be joining it up with SMEs in particular, and that's basically this end-to-end service where we're seen as not just procuring more sustainably, but we're procuring locally and we're adding value to the local economy. And I think there's going to be some real exciting opportunities to demonstrate the added value that it does to the local economy, as well as building that sustainability and waste management process. So really happy to take any questions. Fire away.
So George, maybe I can ask you the first question to get things going. How would a local authority pilot this? And I guess it's a question really for us as much as it is for you, because we're very keen to see how we could get local authorities engaged. What would your recommendation be?
I think in about a couple of months' time, once this trial's done, it would be really good to get people together around the room and sort of showcase and demonstrate the positive effects and the outcomes of what the toolkit's done. And then I would probably try to maybe invite a select few local authorities, and hopefully with different contracts, so we can test it out on a different wide range of contracts. And I would like to bring, I don't know, 3, 5 maybe. It depends on the capacity that LWARB and myself have got and what other local authorities are interested. Obviously, the more we test it, the better. But I think after the trial thing, definitely we get around the table and pilot it and demonstrate the value and start working with other local authorities. It would be very helpful to see it working in different types of local authorities as well, different political makeups, ones that go out to procurement a lot, some that have a lot more in-house, just to see how it works out in different types of local authorities across London and then hopefully the country.
Okay, great. So any local authorities that have an interest, either email us at LWARB or at George.
Yeah,
we'll date those up.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
And start to plan for that. I think that would be a great idea.
Great.
Okay, it's now approaching midday. So unless there's any other questions from anybody, I'm just having a look here just to make sure that we pick them all up. Yeah, I think that, okay, so Parisa's asked, do all council officers and some senior councillors involved in contracting get training on this fabulous toolkit or some kind of contextualization shared with them? Well, I think that's later stages, isn't it? But that would be the idea of piloting this, George.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think we definitely have to package up some guidance notes. And like I said, there's that terrible video of my horrible voice on it talking about the toolkit, but we definitely make it a little bit more professional and package it up so other local authorities can get that training as well as using the toolkit in tandem. So that's something I'd definitely be looking to work on, Parisa, and definitely would like to get the more senior buy-in for us, the easier we can plug the toolkit and roll it out. So we would obviously be looking to roll it out and get directors of the environment departments, LEDNet, for example, London Environment Directors Network, working with them to sort of get them for that top level buy-in down into environmental services, but also across services as well.
Great. And Mark has said he sees a role for the supply community to help broaden adoption of this, like a public-private partnership. Exactly. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And he would be interested in having further conversations with you, George. So that's great news.
Great.
My final comment, which I'm going to close on, is we are all stakeholders on this planet, and it's a great way to think about our increased ambition around repairing and also building circularity into procurement and supply. So thanks everybody for joining us for the last 2 hours. Very rich conversation. We'll be following up on this as well. And we look forward to keeping this conversation going and demonstrating some really amazing action in London as we drive to be the leading low carbon circular city. Thanks everybody, and thank you
very much everybody
for your presentation.
Okay.